Have you heard the truth about Angus Young's fate? Following his mysterious letter at Wembley, rumors began to circulate like wildfire. However, that was just the start. Supporters believe it's simply aging, but there is more to the truth. A choice that could permanently end AC/DC, a band-only secret, and a quiet moment during the tour, all set to reveal what no one else is willing to reveal. A TikTok video from AC/DC's May 4th Power Up Tour performance at Gillette Stadium went viral on social media, putting the band in the middle of a firestorm in early June 2025. An outpouring of criticism followed the footage, which showed Brian Johnson's voice almost drowned out by the noise of the audience. Concerns were raised by fans regarding the band's capacity to play as thrillingly as they had in the past. Many said that their age had finally caught up with them, and asked that the organization call it quits. Some people saw Angus Young duck, wandering around in his signature schoolboy attire at 70 years old, as more of a reminder of the passing of time than a nod to. The performance appeared worn out, according to critics. They maintained that leaving was preferable to running the danger of becoming mediocre. The criticism was not universal, though. Numerous others supported the band, pointing out that they still had the kind of unadulterated energy on stage that most up-and-coming performers could only imagine. Particularly praised for his unparalleled endurance and enthusiasm was Angus Young. Supporters noted that ticket sales were still extremely good in spite of the criticism that went viral. The numbers, which presented a completely different picture, looked to be unrelated to the alleged reduction. The statistics were self-evident, notwithstanding the disagreement. More than 370,000 tickets were sold for all events on June 26th, setting a new record. More than 7 million individuals waited in virtual queues. In order to meet demand, organizers had to add more dates after several locations sold out in a matter of hours. Angus wrote a touching open letter to supporters after his Wembley gig sold out. The letter was posted on social media and the band's official website. In addition to honoring the band's history, Angus's statement expresses gratitude to the millions of fans who have stood by them for almost 50 years. The band's Power Up World Tour included a performance at Wembley that has been generally hailed as a career-defining event full of poignant farewells, nostalgia, and raw intensity. I felt something I hadn't quite felt before, a sense of completion, Angus said in his letter. As I stood on that stage at Wembley, looking out at a sea of faces, screaming every word back at us. That night was more than simply another performance. It was a moment in time that I will always cherish, he added. It seemed like everything had come full circle. It's been the ride of a lifetime, and I want to express my gratitude to my bandmates, both past and present. Brian, Phil, Stevie, and Cliff, I appreciate you all giving it your all every night, supporting me through the highs and lows, and sharing in this. Angus confessed to close friends that 2025 would be his last year with AC/DC. According to a European tabloid, the concert featured classics like Back in Black, Highway to Hell, and Thunderstruck, with a set list that spanned generations. Fans all over the world responded with an outpouring of gratitude, sharing messages and memories of how the band's music shaped their lives. Fans were deeply curious about what was really going on behind the scenes, whether it was age catching up or something much more personal. The report mentioned creative exhaustion, tensions within the band, and frustration with the corporate machinery that now controlled much of their operation. This open letter and the growing retirement rumors did more than just stir emotions. They made fans curious. We need to look closer to find the true reason. Rumors have been circulating in recent months that Angus Young's time with AC/DC may come to an end in 2025, not because of his age or health, but rather because of a battle going on behind the scenes over the band's soul. Industry insiders claim that the conflict stems from an internal rift, a simmering corporate and creative war that has been simmering for years. Angus, who is known for his raw stage energy and old-school rock ethic, reportedly felt that the band's management and label were pushing them to conform to modern trends, including influencer tie-ins, merchandise touring strategies, and even proposals for lifestyle products bearing the AC/DC brand. These changes were causing tension, according to reports from various platforms. Although neither the band nor their record label have released a formal statement, Reddit threads indicate that Angus has privately voiced his frustration over the distortion of the AC/DC brand, with the band's once natural image of leather jackets and gritty guitar solos now at risk of being reduced to hashtags and carefully chosen sponsorships. One thing is certain. Fans are now asking what exactly is happening behind the scenes, rather than whether something is happening. This silence has only stoked speculation. Is Angus quietly getting ready to leave, putting his integrity ahead of industry pressure? Or is this just media spin around a man trying to change in a changing world? We must go back in time to the personal tragedy that rocked the foundation of AC/DC in order to understand how Angus reached this breaking point. On March 7, 2016, a crisis struck that would permanently alter the band's trajectory. Brian Johnson, the band's iconic frontman, received a devastating warning from his doctors. Not only was it a diagnosis that threatened his career, but it was also a deeply personal loss for Johnson, who felt that leaving the stage was like losing a piece of himself. They warned him that if he continued to perform at stadium-level volume, he would suffer complete and permanent hearing loss. Angus Young, the band's lead guitarist and one of its founding members, was forced to make the difficult decision of whether to cancel the remainder of the Rock or Bust tour and incur millions of dollars in losses, or find a way to continue without their lead singer. Rather than ending the tour abruptly, he reached out to someone unexpected: Axl Rose, the unpredictable but powerful frontman of Guns N' Roses. While the controversy unfolded in headlines and comment sections, the band was quietly battling feelings of loss and uncertainty behind the scenes. Some fans were thrilled to see a blending of rock titans, while others were incensed that no one could. Angus called Axl a lifesaver, praising him for keeping AC/DC on course when everything seemed to be falling apart. Brian later talked about the emotional pain of stepping away, comparing it to finding a stranger in your home. It wasn't just about missing shows, it was about being replaced in a role that meant everything to him. Despite this heartbreak, the band continued to. In addition to this crisis, they encountered a similar circumstance in late 2014 when Phil Rudd, the drummer who had led their rhythm section for almost 40 years, was arrested in New Zealand on serious and surprising charges. He was accused of trying to obtain a methamphetamine and cannabis possession. The attempted murder charge was eventually dropped, but the damage was already done. And in 2015, Rudd pleaded guilty to drug charges and threats to kill, receiving an 8-month home detention sentence. The story dominated headlines, depicting a chaotic picture of one of rock's most disciplined bands spiraling behind the scenes. The timing could not have been worse for AC/DC. When Rudd was unable to travel, the band had to make a tough decision and replaced him with Chris Slade, a former drummer who had played with them briefly in the early 1990s. This was a tense time for Angus Young, because their reputation was built not only on iconic riffs and legendary performances, but also on the consistency of their lineup. Getting Rudd into the studio was difficult, and it became even more difficult to promote the album, shoot videos, and get ready for the tour. He later acknowledged in an interview that working with Phil had become more difficult even before the arrest, indicating that the drummer was dealing with more than just legal issues. Despite the controversy, AC/DC released Rock or Bust, but something was lacking. However, Angus refused to let the legacy falter, focusing solely on keeping the music alive, especially as his older brother Malcolm, the rhythm guitarist and co-founder of AC/DC, was silently battling dementia. Critics pointed out that Rudd's signature drumming style was missing, and fans sensed the change. The tour continued, but there was a sense of impending change within the band. By 2020, when he formally returned to the group for Power Up, Phil Rudd's decline had become a footnote. This album was more than just a return to form. It was a tribute to Malcolm, who had died in 2017. The recording sessions were emotional, and Angus used old riffs he and Malcolm had worked on years earlier. The band reunited with familiar energy, channeling their grief and loyalty into one last powerful project. All these crises could have broken any band, but Angus Young remained resilient, not because it was easy, but because he had already faced storms that most people were unaware of. Bringing Rudd back into the fold was a bold move, but it made the album feel complete. What, then, accounts for this unparalleled loyalty and resolve? Let's look back at the thrilling journey that led Angus to this very point. Long before fans argued over his last bow, Angus Young had already cemented his status as one of the greatest musicians of all time. His impact went beyond loud riffs and ferocious solos. It was about redefining what it meant to be a rock performer. Angus, wearing his signature school uniform, accepted the honor in person. In 2003, AC/DC reached a turning point in their career when they were officially inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, a testament to their influence on global music culture. His unwavering energy, schoolboy stage persona, and piercing guitar tone did more than just fill stadiums, they redefined them. He was not just a member of the crowd, he was the norm, thanks to his appearance with artists like Steven Tyler, The Clash, and the Ramones. Critic recognition didn't end there, though, as Angus was named the greatest Australian guitarist of all time by Australian Guitar magazine in 2012. Given the intense competition in the Australian rock scene, this title carried a lot of weight. In 2006, Kerrang!, the voice of hard rock and metal, gave him the prestigious Legend Award, which, unlike fan-voted titles, came from within the industry and recognized his contribution to the genre's identity. The victory put him above virtuosos like Ian Moss and Tommy Emmanuel, whose technical precision had long dominated guitar circles. But Angus was about feel, presence, and untamed emotion. Whether you were born in the 1970s, 1990s, or even the streaming era, you can probably imagine Angus mid-stride with his guitar, slung low and sweat streaming from his brow. His impact went beyond accolades and lists, and guitarists of all ages, from Slash to Dave Grohl, have acknowledged Angus as a significant influence. Even though these accomplishments are impressive, they came after years of pressure. exhaustion, and difficult personal choices. At times, the glitter of trophies only covered up what Angus was going through. His raw distortion and blues-rooted playing helped shape the harder edge of modern rock, even paving the way for genres like grunge and punk. At a show in Arizona around 2000, Angus Young was deep into bad boy boogie when a fan did the unimaginable. This was one of the most tumultuous nights on one of the Angus tours, when something unexpected happened. It was the kind of moment that no one talks about, something that could have ruined the entire performance. Only the band witnessed this scene unfold in real time. The atmosphere froze as he threw a beer at him in the middle of his performance. Thousands of people watched, wondering what would happen next. Would Angus strike back? Would the show fall apart? Angus didn't bat an eye. Instead, he approached the troublemaker, looked him in the eyes, and jiggled his nose without saying anything. The audience roared, not in anger but in respect. The band never stopped playing. The rhythm never broke. The concert went on as if nothing had happened, but the moment left a mark. It wasn't violent, it wasn't loud, but it was sharp, unexpected, and commanding. Angus then signaled security to step in with a simple gesture. Angus didn't give the fan power. Instead, he took it away with a little humor and a snap decision. That one move saved the night, and probably saved the fan from a much harsher reaction. This calm and quick-thinking presence is more than just a performer's trick. This was more than just a humorous on-stage encounter. It became an iconic example of how to shut down disorder with grace. Angus Young was born in Glasgow, Scotland, in March 1955, and grew up in a working-class family in a small flat with his siblings and hard-working parents. The Young home was always full of noise, sometimes arguments, sometimes music, but always brimming with character. To understand that poise, you have to travel back to the suburbs of Sydney, where the youngest of the Young brothers grew up. Life wasn't easy, but it was full of strong personalities and unrelenting energy. His mother, Margaret, kept the family together through quiet resilience and grit, while his father, William Young, worked long hours as a factory worker and handyman. In June 1963, the Youngs made a daring decision that would forever alter Angus's life. The journey to the other side of the world was not luxurious, and the family was placed in a refugee-style migrant hostel where space was limited and comforts were few. They joined the UK's £10 migrant scheme, a government-sponsored passage to Australia that promised sunshine and opportunity in exchange for a small fee. Like thousands of others, eventually they found a new home in Burwood, a quiet suburb on the outskirts of Sydney, which was modest but allowed the young children to explore their surroundings and themselves. While many of his siblings, including Malcolm, who would later co-found AC/DC, spent hours outside playing football or hanging out with local kids, Angus found a different rhythm. He was a loner, and he liked the comforts of his own room where he could lose himself in music. In that tiny room, Angus bought a cheap guitar and began teaching himself, not from books or tutors, but by sitting for hours, listening to the radio, studying records, and imitating Chuck Berry and the Beatles riffs. He played until his fingers ached and his ears could predict every note, and that raw, unrefined, emotionally driven playing became the heartbeat of what AC/DC would one day stand for. Burwood was not just a place where music was growing. His obsession, rather than discipline, helped his fingers become accustomed to the fretboard. During a routine backyard jam session, Angus's sister Margaret noticed that the youngest young man was still small for his age, and gave him his old school tie and shorts. suggesting that he wear them while performing. As AC/DC gained popularity, Angus's reputation as the untouchable schoolboy developed. Angus's rock-solid stage presence belies a deeply private man, and a heartfelt farewell act for his brother Malcolm. What drove the flame behind their last great album? How did the brothers channel decades of struggle, loyalty, and love into one final musical statement? But behind the persona, there was a man fiercely protective of his family, especially his brother Malcolm, who had always been more than just a bandmate. He was his rock. Away from the stage lights, Angus Young has long embraced a life of stability and privacy, and his enduring marriage to Ellen van Lochem, a Dutch native he married in the early 1980s, stands out in a world where rock star relationships frequently end quickly. His personal life is remarkably quiet, even though his guitar roars through stadiums. Even though Angus is known for his unrelenting stage energy, he maintains a disciplined routine and never drank alcohol, a decision that set him apart from many of his peers in the music scene early on. Together, they have created a life that exists far from media frenzy, with their time divided between peaceful homes in Australia, the Netherlands, and the UK, giving Angus the privacy he has always valued. In many respects, Angus has always been more concerned with the music than the fame, and despite his one obvious vice, smoking, he has managed to avoid serious health problems and perform with surprising vigor well into his senior years. He avoids social media, rarely does interviews, and stays away from celebrity culture. When he led AC/DC back into the studio for what would turn out to be a very emotional project in 2020, that dedication was evident. Power Up, which was released in November of that year, was more than just another album. It was a resuscitation of the band's spirit and a secret pledge made by Angus to his older brother, Malcolm, with whom he had spent years writing in silence before Malcolm's fight with dementia overtook him. Reviving the classic lineup was no easy task, as Cliff Williams had retired and Brian Johnson had previously had hearing problems that forced him to step aside. But Angus brought those unused riffs back to life, creating an entire album around their last musical conversations. Power Up was a huge success, topping charts all over the world. But for Angus, it was more than just commercial success. It was emotional closure. Through Power Up, Angus gave fans not only new music, but also a glimpse into the bond that had always powered AC/DC. Phil Rudd had been in legal trouble, but the band had reunited under Angus's quiet leadership, finding new energy and familiar sounds. As younger generations come to know AC/DC and older fans keep coming back, Angus's legacy continues to grow. He never chased trends or softened his sound, instead honoring Malcolm in the best way he knew, through loud, unapologetic. What do you think about Angus Young hanging up his guitar for good? After all he's given to rock music, does retirement feel like the right move? Or would you want one last tour? Let us know in the comments below. Angus Young's dedication to pure rock and roll, built on simplicity, rhythm, and feel, has made AC/DC timeless. With Power Up, Angus did more than just keep the band alive. He made sure that its heart, rooted in family and fire, would never fade.